Welcome to today's roadcast. This week I am back in the lush, rolling countryside of Nottinghamshire. One of the advantages about not having too large an audience is that I don't have to be too concerned about repeating myself or revisiting topics that I've covered before. And in this roadcast today I am going to be revisiting a number of things that I've spoken about before. And the first thing I'm going to talk about is something that I wrote about in 2014. And the title of the essay was Shiver Me Timbers, the citizenship is sinking. And it's an article about anarchism and what it means to be a citizen and all the traps and the pitfalls that are associated with it, and how, you know, being a citizen is necessarily an acceptance that you are part of the great blob, if you like, one of the masses, and that you're operating under on a ship that is dominated or subject to admiralty law. But you know, even if that is the case, you can still be an eccentric, you can still be a staunch individualist, and you know, quite often the two go hand in hand. Just because you are in and out of the collective, because you are at one moment a part of the greater mass, doesn't mean to say that you are permanently in that state. And ultimately the article begins with a quote from John Rappaport, who is a great writer and philosopher, in which he states how powerful the imagination is. The artist is the powerful individual because he's using his imagination to create things, to create his own realities, rather than simply buying into those realities that are spun out by the blob, by which I mean the system, by the state. You know, and the point I'm reiterating here is that all power lies with the individual. And it's the sovereign individual, the one who is beyond reign, R-E-I-G-N, sovereign, beyond the reign. As is often the case, a couple of interesting topics came up in my Twitter thread. The first one was posted by an individual called Graham Moore. When I say individual, I mean it in a very, very positive sense. He is of the English Constitution group or society, I can't quite remember which it is. He posits correctly that the 1688 Bill of Rights establishes in writing what exactly are your rights under the Constitution as an Englishman. He says that the great con, and I'd agree with him, was the creation of the Union, the creation of the United Kingdom. The 1600s must have been a very, very interesting century. Not only did you have the so-called English Civil War, but before that you had the Gunpowder Plot, which was a state-sponsored false flag. You had the rise of Oliver Cromwell and the parliamentarians, backed by the usual Jewish financial suspects, the coin clippers, the usurers, as they were identified as being at the time. And then you had the execution of Charles I at the behest of Cromwell's Jewish handlers, the financiers. You had the so-called Great Fire of London, you had a plague or two, then you had the installation, you had the reimposition of the monarchy through Charles II, and then the imposition, and it was an imposition, of William of Orange onto the throne of England, which was associated with the Bill of Rights. And then from that you had the creation of the Union of the United Kingdom. And before that time, England, Scotland, Wales and Ireland were distinct countries, particularly, you know, with regard to England and Scotland. England and Scotland have been warring for centuries. So I'm no expert in these historical matters, but the 1600s were a very interesting century. And of course there's no clear boundary. The developments continued into the 18th century. Anyway, Graham had made this post, which was backed up by a screenshot of an old book he'd been reading about the Constitution. And it brings up the subject of what sovereignty is, and how some people falsely claim that Parliament is sovereign. And I made the point that public servants cannot, by definition, be sovereign over the people. They can't be above the people. And Graham replied, stating correctly that there's a distinction to be made between crown servants and public servants. But my point is that, I mean, that is correct, but ultimately they are servants, and a servant cannot be a sovereign, because by definition a servant is somebody who is beholden to another, who is placed above them. And you know, this article I wrote called Shiver Me Timbers, I'm going to repost it because it is, it may be, blimey, it may be nearly 12 years old, but as is often the case, if you're speaking the truth, it stands. It's like set in stone, if I may use the analogy, because the truth is the truth, and the truth fears no examination. Now, in that article, right, so that was the issue with Graham Moore and what he brought up. So a servant can never be sovereign, and you know, whatever your view of the Crown as exemplified by the legal personage of King Charles, or Parliament as exemplified by the legal persons who are there to represent the people, ultimately it stands to reason that those entities are beneath the people in terms of the hierarchy. And what we're at now is we're at a situation, a point in history when everything is topsy-turvy. Everything has been inverted. So the servants have taken over the household, as it were. They falsely believe that they have the right to rule over us, you know, and they obviously don't give a fuck for our rights. They don't have any allegiance to the people. And if there's one thing a politician should have, it should be that he is allied to the people. He is there to represent their interests, not to impose tyrannical diktats on them, as Sir Keir Starmer has done, but to defend their rights. And these rights are your birthrights, and they are enshrined in the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights. I found it all very, very interesting. Anyway, I wrote this article back in 2014, or should I say this essay, and in there I was talking about the state, about the citizenship trap. The subject of UK column came up, because I was always a bit suspicious of UK column. It all seemed a bit glib and a bit too professional. It was always clear to me that it was well funded. Brian Gerrish was a former, in inverted commas, naval commander. Mike Robinson is a former MI5 employee. Alex Thompson worked for GCHQ. And then you've got other people in the background like Justin Walker. And, although I'm not entirely sure how deeply involved he was, you've got Roger Hayes. Now, I did a bit of digging into who owned UK Column, because it was a registered company, and its address was the Lodge Road in Plymouth. And I went to a meeting one evening in which Roger Hayes was giving a talk, and I asked him specifically about this address that the UK Column was using, because clearly, you know, it's a Freemasonic address, the Lodge Road, Plymouth. And I was thinking also about the name of UK Column. It's been around now probably since about 2008, 2007. And a column, like a fifth column, is an invading army, if you like, that's been brought in through the back door, so to speak. So I was always a bit wary of UK Column, and I was particularly wary of it when they always declined to go anywhere near the subject of the Great British Mortgage Swindle, because they said that UK Column's target audience was Middle England, many of whom would have mortgages. The subject of the Great British Mortgage Swindle to be of no interest, I don't know. There's a dog just gone past there without any functioning back legs, which is interesting. Maybe that's analogous to the UK Column. Anyway, there's all these players in the background. There's dubious affiliations there's the subject of those subjects that they will and will not cover. And it all adds up, as far as I was concerned, and still to this day I'm concerned, to a questionable entity, a limited hangout. You know, we're in a mental construct, whichever way you wish to look at it. And so we should not be surprised that everything is of a psychological nature. Everything is to do with the psyche, the spirit. And so today, some 12 years after I wrote this article, it came in my Twitter feed that 20% of the UK column is owned by this bloke. He's either based in Hong Kong or in China. And some people were saying, a lot of comments were there, were saying, well, this proves that it's a limited hangout, or this proves it's not to be trusted. Many people were saying how they could no longer listen to it anyway, that there was always something dodgy about the UK column. And I'm thinking, hello, I mentioned this 12 years ago. I've actually met Brian Gerrish. The last time I met him, would you believe, was at the Albert Hall in Nottingham. They put on an event to which I was invited. And I'm not saying I'm close to Brian Gerrish. I like the fella, he's alright. In fact, I had a chat with him whilst we were both stood in the toilets. Yeah, we were both up against the urinals. But you know, that's going back over 10 years now anyway. I've met him previously also. You know, and as I stated the other week when I did my little piece about patriotism and how Morrissey is a great British patriot, I don't question Brian Gerrish's patriotism, but I do question exactly what the modus operandi is of UK column, and I have been questioning it for 12, 14 years. I suppose what it boils down to is ultimately, who can you trust? You know, and there is a saying, it's not just from Yorkshire, but it's quite a dominant saying from Yorkshire: if they want a job doing properly, there's best doing it this end. That goes hand in hand with what I'm saying when it comes to how the individual, all the power essentially lies with the individual and his imagination. Because you are, through your imagination, you're a creation of yourself, you're a self-created individual. And that's why there are all these years, over a dozen years of education, to kind of wipe out that sense of you being an individual. It's an attempt to draw you into the hive mind, to draw you into the blob, as it were, the artificial social construct. Yeah, so essentially, I'm just reiterating the point about how each and every one of us is, by definition, an individual. And it's the individual that is sovereign, not a cadre of fools, a collection of collectivist zealots who falsely believe that they have the right to rule over you, whether it is through having inherited some hereditary title like king, or from just being a complete fuckwit like Sir Keir Starmer, who falsely believes in his own powers to dominate, to lecture and tell people what to do. If we're talking about how all power lies with the individual, here's something that may well interest you. GDPR is General Data Protection Regulations. As we're living in a world of let's just call it the world of it's the digital age, right? Where all your information is being processed by bots, by AI and the rest of it. And that means every time you go into a supermarket, you are being monitored. They are taking your image and they're using their systems to create a data profile. But they're not allowed to, they can only get away with it if you don't object. So under GDPR Article 21, you have the right to opt out. And if you exercise that right, it really screws them over, apparently. GDPR is supposed to protect you, but it's being abused by all these corporations and state entities. For example, DVLA, apparently every time an agency requests the data attached to a particular number plate, in other words the name of and address of the registered keeper, DVLA charges them £2.50. Now, well, just before we do that, I don't know if you can see behind me, but we've got a wonderful array of bluebells. The daffodils were out several weeks ago, and we're now moving into that stage. Well, it's the bluebells. I think we're in amongst some elm trees here. Anyway, so basically, every time it does that, if you don't object, then DVLA and all these entities like Morrison, Sainsbury's, Asda, they will happily sell on your data or keep it as a means of profiling their customers. So if you're paying, even if you're paying with cash, even if you're paying, say you're paying a self-checkout in Aldi or Lidl or Morrison's, wherever it might be, you'll notice these days they've got a high definition screen that is taking your image. So that image is going to be associated with the payment, whether it's cash or card. It's easy to make the connection if you are paying with a card, of course. So you can basically send a data subject access request, a DSAR, to any of these entities stating that you were there on such and such a day, and you demand that they provide you with all the data that they've collected on you. Keep your receipts, it's worthwhile. You give them 3 opportunities to provide you with the data, and if they don't do so, at the end of the process, which could take maybe, they've got 28 days to respond initially, and then you can give them another 14 days, and on top of that another 7 days as a reminder. If after that period they fail to provide you with any of the data, you can go to the small claims court and for £70 issue a claim against them, against the individual, for having been in breach of the GDPR. They've not provided you with the data to which you're entitled. And apparently it's a slam dunk. In other words, they won't be able to contest it because they've clearly broken the rules, as it were. So I was looking at this fellow's work. It's called Charles Fernandez, and he was saying that essentially you can charge them. It's caused you alarm and distress not being provided with the information to which you are legally entitled. So he was suggesting you charge £1,000 and then add the costs on top of that, and do it online, file it in the small claims court, and jobs are good. And you can do this regularly for each and every one of these entities. Now, I'm going to leave it there because I haven't actually tried it out myself. The principle sounds good. Charles Fernandez has got an AI system called Willoughby Genius, and I think I'm going to be checking it out. But there are a few of these coming up now. And sometimes, we've got to be mindful that a technology is not necessarily a bad thing. It's not necessarily something that is being used against us. It's a tool that we can use as individuals to stand up to whatever tyranny is being chucked our way. So, that illustrates my point. We are more powerful than we realise. And, it's all of it, all the tyranny is dependent upon your compliance, in your consenting via your silence, or you're simply going along to get along, which never works out well, because compliance with tyranny always ends in disaster. So the individual has a number of opportunities to fight back, on top of his God-given powers of reason, his imagination, his ability to construct his own reality. All of this is stirred into the pot, as it were. And if you think that I'm bullshitting, then just think about the analogy of the little boy who, it's the Dutch story of the little boy who sees a hole in the dam wall, the water's gushing out. So he goes up and puts his finger in it to plug the hole. But shortly, more and more holes become apparent, and he hasn't got enough fingers or enough reach to plug them all. So after a time, the dam wall is completely full of holes and is leaking to the point where it's on the verge of collapsing. The state cannot stop these holes appearing, and it hasn't got enough individuals or competent people working for it to plug all the holes in the dam wall. Leakages are popping up left, right and centre, and that is a good thing. That's to our advantage. And if you see them as see these holes, and you're an individual who is non-compliant, even maybe recalcitrant, or certainly an errant in the system, then you will know just how powerful you can be. And that's really the essence of today's talk. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to talk about, so I am freestyling it a bit today. But I am going to represent the essay, Shiver Me Timbers, the citizenship is sinking, because I think it's important that people realise that they can do something. They don't have to go along with the blob. They don't have to accept that they're on a ship and that they are effectively galley slaves rowing under the decks whilst the public servants and the crown servants sit at the top having a good nosh. When it boils down to it, you are sovereign, and ultimately, as we know, and spiritually speaking, there's no man-made entity, no agency of the demiurge can come between you and the creator of all that is. And you're just one essence of that divine creation. Now here's a good joke I heard the other day. There's two kinds of Europe. There's a heavenly Europe and there's a hellish Europe. In the heavenly Europe, the French are the chefs, the British are the police, the Germans are the engineers, the Swiss are the bankers, and the Italians are the lovers. The counterpoint of that is the hellish version of Europe, in which the Italians are the bankers, the Swiss are the lovers, the British are the chefs, the French are the mechanics, and the Germans are the police. Now, credit where credit is due, I did hear that from a fellow called the Greek. I'm going to be a bit cheeky this week. I'm going to put out a request, and it's a request for people who are enjoying the content to buy me a few coffees, because using that as if you're making a donation, it's going to help me to upgrade my equipment. First of all, I need to get a more effective microphone that means I can be out and about and we're not subject to the vagaries of the wind. And secondly, I'm going to buy a new camera. I want to upgrade my recording equipment, and I was looking at a GoPro or something of that nature. So if you're able and you'd like to help out, please chuck a few quid into the Buy Me a Coffee pot, and I will put it towards getting some new equipment which will improve the production quality of these rogue casts. I've made very good progress in the upgrading of the website to include a more proactive and effective email system. So if you subscribe at roguemail.org, you will receive a welcome email, and also I'm going to be putting out a series of newsletters. Usually a newsletter which will cover some of the recent posts that I've made and alert people to essays and roadcasts that they may find interesting. So in that sense, every little help, even if you're only buying me one coffee, it does help, and I will put it towards the upgrading of the site and the upgrading of the production values of these roadcasts. I've decided to stay on Twitter for the time being, and you might think, well, why are you doing that? I decided because I find it very interesting insofar as I can get some good information from Twitter. I am throttled there, but I do get people commenting occasionally and sharing information that I find very, very interesting. So for now at least, I'm going to stay on X. But one of the things that's come into my purview recently is the issue of the Trumpanos, the crime family known as the Trumps, and how they've been running various extortion rackets, or grifts you might say, to raise hundreds of millions of dollars using Trump, the insane Donald, as the source of the insider trading knowledge, and they benefited enormously from it. So one of the ways they did it was to issue a World Liberty Finance coin. They offer this Liberty coin as a way of breaking free a DeFi coin, a decentralized finance. Decentralized finance is a very, very attractive proposition. I'm not entirely sure whether it's achievable at the moment, because people tend to be operating under the criminal jurisdictions of these various Rothschild-controlled states and entities and financial institutions. Anyway, it was essentially along the lines of this, on the strength of who was behind it, namely the Trump brand. And he named his sons as co-directors of the company. People were encouraged to invest, to convert their fiat dollars into these crypto tokens. And then when they collected hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars, they essentially locked them down. So the people who had these wallets with these Trump coins in them, these World Liberty Finance coins in them, couldn't do anything with them. They certainly couldn't transfer them into other accounts, and they couldn't exchange them for other currencies. Having been promised some kind of liberty, some kind of decentralized financial system, which would be for everyone's benefit and would help them to bypass the controllers, the financiers, and none of it came about. So essentially it was a scam, and the amounts of money laundering that have taken place are astronomical, all to the benefit of the Trumpanos, the Trump family. I mean, even his teenage son Barron Trump, 6'9", whatever he is, was made a director at the age of 19. And so on top of this, you've got all this insider trading going on with regard to people shorting the oil market on the basis that they know when Trump's going to be issuing a ceasefire, or whether an act of aggression is going to be taking place. The market fluctuates and people buy or sell or take a short position in accordance with that inside knowledge. That's insider trading. So if at this point you haven't realised that the Trump family is one hell of it's a gangster operation. It's like the Sopranos. It's like the Kosher Nosha, the Jewish gangsters. In fact, any gangsters you can think of, they're running it along family lines for the benefit of those individuals in the family. But at the same time, it's all unravelling at quite a rapid rate for Donald Trump. He's even managed to upset the Pope by putting out an AI picture of himself depicted as Jesus, and then falsely claiming that it was supposed to be showing him as a healer working for the Red Cross. It is laughable. But it just further illustrates the point I've been making for several months now, that we are in the apocalypse and nothing can be hidden right now. So if you're a good individual, you will continue to shine out as such. If you're a wrong un who's got things to hide, you've got certain psychological traits, modes of behaviour, and like psychological tics, you're not going to be able to hide them. It will become clear and apparent that you're a wrong un. And so that's how it's unfolding right now. And it is in many ways a wonderful time to be alive, but it can be also rather trying. I suppose you've got to get to that point where you don't give a flying fuck anymore. Just stop caring about it. And one way to do that is to turn off the media and stop paying attention to it. But then again, you're in a bit of a double bind, because you can't always afford to do that. You need to have some knowledge about what's going on as and when it affects you. On this subject of an individual who's a wronger, not being able to hide it from other people, I was listening for the first time to a podcast by Sonia Poulton, and it was about David Walliams and Matt Lucas, and what a couple of invidious characters they are. And she was right to make the point that they are part of the BBC apparatus, which was essentially in the early noughties being run as a demoralisation programme, and heavily promoting sexual deviancy. And so she quite rightly pointed them out as a pair of perverts. And I thought, she mentioned that that the bald fat one, Lucas, not only is he a homosexual, and not only is David Walliams what's the term, bisexual, but a particularly predatory one. They are also Matt Lucas is also Jewish. Anyway, last week's roadcast did go into the subject of the overrepresentation of Jewish peoples in public institutions. So, I shouldn't be surprised that Matt Lucas is one of the protected class. Remember what I've said. History shows us that the people always get to the point where they are completely, utterly fed up to the back gills of the activities of those of a Jewish persuasion. Not just the financial malpractices, the fraud of the Great British Mortgage Swindle, for instance, the coin clipping, the usury, but also other strange practices. Well, I mean strange criminal practices. Remember who it was that was running the slave trade across the Atlantic? Who owned all the ships? Remember who it was that was running the mafia programs throughout the USA, that controlled all the ports? It was the Kosher Nostra, the Jewish gangsters. And whilst they use a term like blood libel, when someone points out how in the historical record the Jews were accused of vampirism and cannibalism, of the killing of young children who were not of a Jewish persuasion, and doing all kinds of horrific things to them. That is now labelled a blood libel. But no smoke without fire would be my answer to that. And the truth fears no examination. So if these things are all bullshit, and if our ancestors were racist towards the Jews, and if they had a dislike of them that was irrational and just based in blind prejudice, then let's fucking examine that. Provide the evidence that that is the case. And of course, when you look into it, there is no examination of the truth. They just want to cover it up. If the truth does not fear examination, then the opposite of the truth is lies. Lies and deceptions do fear examination, because that's why they have something to hide. Always the way. And it stands to reason. In the beginning was the Logos, and the Logos was God. God is reason. All of this has been divinely created. It's too perfect, too mathematically precise for it to be anything other than a divine creation. The notion that it's an accident that all stems from a Big Bang is simply ludicrous. And it's a notion that belongs to the gross materialism of those who identify with the demiurge, the false god of this world. So just remember, the elites are cannibals and vampires. They are operating in a parasitic host relationship with the people. An individual is sovereign. A collection of crown and or public servants, by definition, cannot be sovereign. They are servants. They are there to serve their masters. And so, as you read through the article, you will see essentially why we can only, if we think about it carefully, we can only reach one conclusion when we come to the character of Jesus and the Christ consciousness. And the conclusion is that Jesus, whatever he may have been, wherever he may have lived, whatever he taught, whatever he did, was essentially an anarchist. Someone who was beyond control in this world, but not of it. And if you've got this far, and what I'm saying chimes with your heart and rings true in your soul, then you're probably an anarchist as well. You're certainly going to be inherent in the system. Someone who finds lies abhorrent. And quite possibly someone who is fed up with the lies, the distortions and the deceits of those oh so superior individuals who call us the Goyim, who all share the belief that we are little more than dumb cattle. So, on that note, let me wish you all a splendid day, each and every one of you. And in fact, really, I shouldn't be talking to you as a collective, I should be talking to you and you and you and you. One and one and one and one. Remember, the I, the capitalised I, is the number one. All is one when it boils down to it. Wherever one may be, one wishes that one is having a splendid day. Don't let the bastards grind one down. Apply your reason and intuition to it, and you won't go far wrong. If you're watching this on YouTube, or possibly on Rumble, please like and share and drop me a comment, because it does help. I'm actually, I think the last time I mentioned it, I was on something like 275 subscribers on YouTube. It's now up to 291, so we are making some progress. I'm unsure as to whether we'll be able to reach 500 by the end of April, but we can give it a go. So like I say, if you haven't subscribed already, please do so. Please give it the thumbs up and please share it with other like-minded individuals. I am also available on Facebook, on Twitter, X, on Substack, and of course at my website roguemail.org. So, from the woods adjacent to Beauvale Priory, I'm going to wish you a fond farewell. Go out, sniff a few bluebells, gather a few up if you like, and rejoice. Rejoice in your individuality and rejoice in the fact that spring has sprung. Until the next time, my friends, thank you for listening, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Cheers.